The current Trump administration is seeking to strike yet another blow to working-class men and women. This time it comes as a proposed rule by the U.S. Department of Labor that will drastically weaken current construction apprenticeships by attempting to implement the IRAP, or the Industry Recognized Apprenticeship Program. Apprenticeship programs have been heavily regulated by the DOL in order to maintain quality, rigor, and accessibility. The result has been a safe and skilled workforce. The intent of the IRAP program is to move the oversight of these programs from the hands of the DOL and place it in the hands of private industry whose sole purpose is profit. Just watch what happens when apprentices are trained without stringent regard to safety and quality training. Unions fought hard to bring training standards up. IRAPs will undo decades of quality control. The DOL comment period ends August 27th. Visit SaveConstructionApprenticeships.org for a link to express your concern for our skilled working class.
If you've been seriously injured as a result of a car wreck, construction accident, medical malpractice, or any other type of incident, you need to retain the right law firm for the job as soon as possible. Insurance companies have floors of lawyers on retainer, ready to fight against your case. But with so many lawyers in Illinois, how do you choose the right one? Well, if honesty, reputation, resources, and a successful track record are important to you, as they should be, then you should choose the GWC Law Firm. For over 40 years, we've helped tens of thousands of our clients obtain settlements and verdicts in excess of more than $2 billion. Are you thinking you can't afford one of Chicago's best legal teams for your injury case? Well, think again. At GWC, we never get paid unless and until you get paid. So if you or a loved one has suffered serious injury on or off the job, call GWC immediately at 312-999-9999 or visit us at justicestartstoday.com.
The following program, One More Good Idea, is sponsored by Marcus Newman, and to the extent applicable, his guests. The views and opinions expressed therein do not necessarily reflect those of News Web Radio Company or its management.
Good morning, everybody. This is One More Good Idea. I'm your host, Marcus Newman. We've got a special show today. Today we have a sponsor. Our show today comes to us via MDR Law. MDR Law is a personal injury law firm in Chicago. They handle personal injury cases, medical malpractice, motor vehicle incidents, workers' compensation law, product liability, so forth and so on. MDR Law is a group of highly trained professional attorneys whose service and commitment to their clients is second to none. Their phone number is 312-229-5555. That's 312-229-5555. MDR Law. If you have had a loss and you need some consultation, give them a call. Today's show, One More Good Idea, I'm going to call it THEYdys and gentleTHEM. We're going to talk about gender, and we're going to talk about gender identification. I'd like to dedicate this show to my daughter Zoe, or Ren, if you know her. If you want to get in on this conversation, if you would like to learn, express yourself, communicate, or deal with how the gender identification evolution is taking place, then please feel free to give us a call at 773-763-9278. That's 773-763-9278. If you're not ready to jump in just yet, write it down. I'll come back to that number many times. I'd like to thank producer Paul. Hey, producer Paul, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. Nikos, our regular producer, is away this week, but Paul has graciously stepped in. And Paul, I'm sure you cannot wait to get started on this conversation, huh?
I can't. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm happy to participate.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you're here, because if you weren't here, we would be dark. So
yeah, that would be true.
I appreciate you very much for being here. And today's guest on One More Good Idea is Sara Manewith. Sara is the director at Response for Teens. Hi, good morning, Sara. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I just want to start by saying that, well, you said my name, Sara. My pronouns are she and hers, and I'm a cisgender woman. And I can tell you a little bit about Response for Teens before we start.
Let's do that. But before you do that, Sarah, I just want to reiterate and clarify what you have just said.
Sure.
That your pronouns are she and hers, so that when people are referring to you or talking about you, you're comfortable with them using those pronouns. And you described yourself as a cisgender woman.
Yeah.
Cisgender meaning...
Meaning that my gender identity aligns with the sex that I was assigned at birth, which is I was assigned as a girl. When I was born, physicians and my parents looked at my body mostly and said, okay, this person has the genitals and the reproductive organs of a female. And I grew up sort of feeling that I'm a female. I was a girl growing up, and today I feel like a woman. So my gender is very much aligned and in sync with my chromosomes and hormones and the body that I was born with.
And the read that the doctor had.
Yes, at that time.
When you arrived. Okay, so we're popping the top off of these things, and we're going to get into all of those terms and what's happening in the world in regard to gender and how this generation of adults, the newest generation of adults, is expressing themselves and dealing with how they feel and how they identify. Before we get into all that, let's talk about Response for Teens.
Sure.
So what is it?
Yeah.
What is Response for Teens?
So Response for Teens belongs to the family of services of JCFS Chicago, and Response has been around for going on 50 years. It was founded in 1970 by a group of social service organizations as literally at the time a response to the drug problems that was being seen in the late 60s and early 70s. Since that time, Response has always been, responsive, if you will, to the needs of adolescents. So today, we focus on mental health and mental wellness. We have 5 therapists that do basic psychotherapy and all the things that any of us may have experienced within the 4 walls of being with a therapist. We have therapists who specialize in working with kids with gender dysphoria or transgender and gender nonconforming kids, as well as stress and anxiety, which are 2 of the biggest concerns of adolescents today. We also have a pretty significant and robust community education program, mostly in the sectors of sexuality and relationship wellness. So we have health educators that go out to schools and community centers and synagogues and Boy Scout troops and help young people and emerging adults understand healthy relationships, wellness in relationships, and all the nuts and bolts of human sexuality. All our educational programming is completely gender inclusive. And when we talk about even sort of the specifics of sex and sexuality, we make a point to make sure that all people are included and comfortable in those conversations. There's one more component to our work, and that is our leadership development program. And so we know that adolescents have the capacities and skills and smarts to be leaders in the world. And in fact, most social movements historically have always been inspired and led by teenagers. Even, the Revolutionary War in this country, many of those leaders were, 19, 20 years old.
Young people for sure.
Young people.
Okay, so clearly your organization, the organization that you direct, is on the front lines, working with emerging adults, young people on various topics, but gender being one of them. You said a whole bunch of things in there, and that I want to clarify language and make sure that anybody who's listening to the show is on board for the discussion and doesn't kind of get left behind. I know oftentimes I get left behind by some of this language and need to catch up afterwards. Okay. So we talked about you in that presentation. You talked about sexuality, but we are not talking about sexuality today per se. We are talking about gender and assigned sex and how those 2 things are interrelated and how one deals with when those 2 things do not align. And then how the community deals with those people who are dealing with that situation. So let's start with one's sex.
Sure.
So we talked a little bit about this when you were introducing yourself.
Yeah.
Sex is assigned at birth.
Correct.
Who assigns somebody's sex?
Well, most typically it's the physician or the healthcare practitioner who is at the delivery of a newborn baby. And historically, babies were assigned either male or female, and sometimes intersex. Intersex means that someone is born with ambiguous genitals. And that is said to happen about 1 in 1,000 births, and that seems like it's been pretty consistent across, many, many, many decades since it's being tracked. So when there are ambiguous genitals, a healthcare person might look at hormones that are present, chromosomes that are present, internal reproductive organs.
Gotcha. So it can be oversimplified as a plumbing issue.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if there is ambiguous plumbing, then we can go more scientific. We can look at chromosomes. We can look at XY or X. And then ultimately there's a determination made by somebody other than the infant.
Yes,
obviously.
correct.
Okay. So that's one sex. What is gender?
Yeah.
Because I know that on applications and forms it says gender, and what it's asking me is sex. Yeah.
Right. So those two terms have very often been confused and conflated. So I prefer to talk about gender identity rather than just the term gender. And so our gender identity is really our sense of self, our sense of, for right now, I'm going to use the terms maleness or femaleness because those have often been tied to the sex assigned at birth, but our sense of who we are, how we move in the world. And then that is often replicated in our gender expression. So how I choose to present myself to the larger world. So I mentioned before that I'm a cisgender woman and have identified with, as a younger person as a girl and today as a woman. And I choose some of the external trappings, which I should editorialize, are typically socially constructed and socially defined. But so I'm wearing lipstick, and that has often been identified with femaleness. And so that would be my gender identity.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, in doing some research, because, people don't believe me. The people who know me the best just simply refuse to believe that I'm willing to do research, but I am. And to do this, to interview somebody who has such a wealth of experience in regard to these issues, one must be prepared. And I learned the following. Gender identity is a personal sense of one's own gender. It's an internal
I agree.
origin and then an outward presentation, whereas sex is an outward or origination. Somebody's looking at me and then telling me what my sex is, and that comes towards me, and my gender goes out from me.
And can I also add that as an adult, we might have what might be called a gender attribution, which is also external. So walking down the street or sitting in a classroom or an office, people look at you and me and all of us and make an assumption about where they want to fit us into typically the dyad of maleness and femaleness. But I would prefer to say identify us along a spectrum of gender.
Okay, so you introduced the term dyad. Some people will call that the binary structure, the male, female, yes, no, A, B, 1, 0 kind of thing. We'll get back to that. So I just want to be clear, and for anybody that might be listening or interested in this conversation, that sex and gender are not the same thing.
Correct.
When they align, we use the term cis.
Yes.
Right? Cisgender.
Yeah.
And that term indicates that one's sex that was given to them, assigned to them at birth, and their gender align. Cisgender. We used to call that normal or the norm or regular or any of those words. But if you're paying close attention to the language, if that is a norm, anything outside of that would be abnormal, and that is not how we feel about one's gender identification. That normal is not some prescribed.
Absolutely. And so there may be what is more common, although I think what we're really learning is what, you said was previously described as normative or the norm is really not necessarily. And there is significant historic evidence that there have always been people who are outside the binary in one way or another. There have always been people whose internal sense of themselves has not necessarily matched an external assignment. And I think that's true certainly in the United States, but we can look across time and across culture for evidence of non-binary humans.
Sure, of course. And there are all kinds of resources on the interwebs where you can research and find some of this out. Okay, so again, our phone number is 773-763-9278. Paul, our producer, is manning our Facebook Live page. So if you're out there and you're interested or listening and have questions, comments, or anything else that you'd like to add to this conversation, please feel free to join in. Again, 773-763-9278, or send us some comments on Facebook. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah.
If I were a person whose gender identity was not in line with my assigned sex. So when I was born, I had male genitalia. They called me a boy. But I'm operating in the world, and I have a sense from inside of me that I do not feel like a male, or I do not see myself as a male. I do not identify as a male. At that point, I am now transgender. Is that correct? Right.
And some people might use the term gender queer or gender nonconforming.
Right. So here's another evolution in our language.
Okay.
I am a 48-year-old man, and when I was growing up, the term queer referred to a homosexual.
Right. And a derogatory term.
Yes. Without a doubt. In fact, it's not anything that I understand or that I can explain, but at my elementary school, every single day, the children went out onto the football field and played a game called Schmear the Queer.
Oh, wow.
And that was our vernacular. The teachers used it, the students used it, and I don't even believe that we knew what those words meant at the time to be, we did eventually. But for sure was a derogatory term. But today, the term queer or genderqueer does not refer to sexuality. This is not a term that identifies somebody as a homosexual. Just that their gender identity relationship and their sex orientation relationship do not align completely in a binary setting.
I think that's part of it, Mark, but I also think that queer and genderqueer can be a really broad umbrella term for anyone that doesn't fit into the binary in some way. So even people who we might describe as traditionally, they're just gay or a lesbian, they might also identify with the word queer because they don't fit this heteronormative traditional standard.
Cis.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So let's kind of unpack this. Sexuality, whether I'm a homosexual or a heterosexual or an asexual, these all refer to who I'm attracted to in a romantic way.
Correct.
They are not about my gender.
They are not about your gender. And the attraction can even further be divided into who you may be romantically attracted to, who you may be emotionally attracted to, and who you may be sexually attracted to. If we're lucky, that comes in one package. But for many of us, though, we might have attractions to different people for different things.
So that's a three-dimensional axis. You said romantically, you said sexually, and what was the third? Emotionally.
Yeah.
I did some reading and found some philosophy from the early 70s about how one's emotional attraction and one's sexual attraction are really on two different axes. And that you can be emotionally attracted to somebody and not sexually attracted to them. You could be sexually attracted to somebody and not emotionally attracted to them. And then the spectrum of the two operating in a typical graph, but now we add one more and make it three-dimensional. It gets even more complicated.
Absolutely.
I'm sure there are people who are either listening or will listen to this show and they think, okay, this is starting to like unravel and get so complicated.
Yeah.
When did it get so complicated, or has it always been and we just haven't talked about it?
Well, my perspective is certainly that we are now naming what has always existed. I think it is absolutely complicated, and any one of us that has been engaged in any human relationship, family, siblings, parent-child, romantic, sexual. We know how complicated and messy they are. Now we are able to sort of lift off many of the layers and veils of those intimate interpersonal relationships and start doing some naming that has probably always existed. But we're in a time where certainly identity has really taken precedence in understanding how we all operate, that we are intersectional human beings, or as someone wise once said, we contain multitudes. And so I think that's the key right now, is that we're naming and talking.
Yeah. Well, I have 3 daughters, and they at various times have been in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell them the same thing. Like, if you're going to be in a relationship with another human being, the most important thing to know, what I have learned, the one and only truth that I am aware of, is that it's complicated. And this for sure is demonstrative of those kinds of complications, but important. And the reason that I'm so excited to have this show at this time, I think it's very timely, because there are parents who are taking their children to college for the first time. And for the first time in their lives, they are going to be confronted with the question, what is your name and what are your pronouns?
Right.
And so we know that we have he and his. Those are my pronouns. You said that yours are she and hers. But there are they and theirs.
Yes.
And then Z. Z and some of the other ones.
Z and Zer.
Z and Zer.
And also, although I will say those are relatively in limited use. And then there is Z and here, which is spelled H-I-R and pronounced here.
And those are pronouns. And we now let our college students tell us what their pronouns are, and then they get added. Those pronouns are added to the name tags that these students will wear during their orientation and so forth and so on. Now, I have experienced this in my own lives with my children going to college. And I have a sister, and she is married, and I have a brother-in-law, and he is one of my favorite people in the world. And he and I have had conversations about this, and he struggles with it. I personally don't, it doesn't affect me. If somebody wants me to use different pronouns, I'm totally okay with that. But my brother-in-law has expressed to me that he feels that it's an imposition on him. That this evolution of pronoun usage. So we're a little bit ahead of a break. So right before our break, let's just open this up. Then we'll come back and finish it up.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, I have a lot to say about that.
And pronouns are important. And so let's pop the top off and just get into they, theirs. Let's stick with that for right now. The Z is a still kind of a little
somewhat
fringy.
Of an outlier. Yeah.
But they and theirs. There are people who would prefer that you refer to them as they and theirs. Even though they're one singular person, they prefer to be called they or them or theirs.
Yeah.
On the surface, this seems problematic. Is it true that these pronouns are plural and being asked to apply them to a singular person is an imposition?
So in the English language, we have used the singular they and their at least since around 1375 is when the Oxford English Dictionary traces it back. So the plural they has been around for a long time. Also used widely by William Shakespeare, used by Emily Dickinson, and used by all of us today very routinely when somebody, for example, leaves their phone in the conference room. I pick it up and I say, oh, gee, somebody left their phone. If they are looking for it, tell them that it's in my office.
Wait, hold on, hold the phone. Did you just give us an example of almost everybody we know already using they and theirs to express a singular unknown gender person's identity?
Yes.
I don't know whose phone it is. I don't know if it's a man's or a woman's. And so I say, somebody left their phone. So if that's the case, my confusion comes at this point. Why are there so many people that are just against using they and theirs when somebody would like them to?
I think because people are willing to use it in that common way that we just gave the example of, but there is something different and psychologically unsettling, I think, about the whole gender fluidity conversation for people who may still be stuck in the binary. And so this is the tension of progress right now.
Tension of progress is a nice way to say that these people might not really be concerned about the other person's experience, perhaps. But we're going to finish up this conversation right after the break. Please remember that today's show is brought to you by MDR Law. MDR Law is a personal injury law firm in Chicago, and they can be reached at 312-229-5555. If you've had a loss and you need somebody to protect your interests and to help you be compensated for your loss, MDR Law are the people that you want to talk to. We'll be right back after the break and finish up our conversation about the gender identity evolution with Sara Manewith from Response for Teens just after these messages.
Think Theory Radio.
Can we achieve a higher level of thought, mind expansion? One of my favorite quotes is from Nikola Tesla. To understand the universe, think in terms of frequency, energy, and vibration. And quantum physics has taught us is that everything has a vibrational frequency. And there are different ways to tap into these frequencies and open up your mind to a different state of consciousness.
Think Theory Radio with Damian Perdue. Saturdays at 6 p.m. on WCPT 820.
We all know the market is designed to make Wall Street wealthy and not you. Let's face it, the big banks control the financial markets. The system is designed for them, not for us. But what if we could simply follow what they do, beat them at their own game, so we know when to invest and when to pull out? That's where Online Trading Academy comes in. They've been in business for over 20 years and have a 95% student satisfaction rating from over 170 reviews. Learn their patented supply and demand strategy designed to help you identify low-risk, high-reward opportunities. Right now, they're offering you the first class for free. Just stop by their campus in Lombard and see if this is right for you. Seats go quickly, so call 888-397-RSVP. 888-397-7787 or visit them online at otaclass.com.
It's back to school, and Target has jeans starting at $8 and tees starting at $4 for every school list. Target's got all your kids' favorite styles of jeans: skinny, straight cut, jeggings, flares, and more, all starting at just $8.
Good jeans for everybody.
And Target has t-shirts in all their favorite colors, starting at just $4.
Terrific!
Get jeans starting at $8 and tees starting at $4 for every school list. Low prices for back to school. At Target. Restrictions may apply.
Hawk Volkswagen in Joliet is the #1 volume Volkswagen dealer in Illinois for 3 years in a row and counting. With over 300 new Volkswagen models to choose from, Hawk Volkswagen of Joliet's supply will meet your demand. Drive a new 2019 Volkswagen Jetta 1.4 TS, just $16,075, or a brand new 2019 Volkswagen Tiguan 2.0 TS all-wheel drive for $22,414. Choose from over 75 Tiguan models. Need more room? How about a 2019 7-passenger Volkswagen Atlas 2.0 TS, just $27,133. Choose from over 100 Atlas models. Shop the #1 volume Volkswagen dealer and get the ultimate customer experience. Hawk Volkswagen on Jefferson Street in Joliet or online at hawkvw.com.
Plus tax title license and entry. Better than 3BWN57BU0KM2185334. P1 bin 3BB0B7AX4KM176498. Atlas bin 1V282KC571022. #1 volume based on 2018 retail sales.
Hi, this is Michael Garland. You're listening to One More Good Idea with Marcus Newman. It's the show after my show. It's lovely.
Hey everybody, this is Marcus Newman with One More Good Idea. I'm in the studio today with Sara Manewith from Response for Teens. We're brought to you by MDR Law today. And we're going to finish up our conversation about gender identity. We're talking pronouns right now. And Sara, we opened the lid on the pronoun discussion. You were just telling me something in the break that in your industry, at your meetings. Why don't you share that with
Yeah, so in the human services sector, at any meeting that we are at, whether it's internal within our agency or among people from a variety of sectors, when we go around and do the basic introductions, we always talk about our pronouns. And we do that for a variety of reasons. As I said in my introduction, I'm a cisgender woman, and most people would probably read me as female. They would attribute that to me. But I don't want to make any assumptions about what people's gender identity is. And so by me saying, I'm Sara, and I use the pronouns she and her, it gives everybody the opportunity to say what their pronouns are. And it also gives me the opportunity to understand that really you can't judge a book by its cover just because of how somebody may look or present.
Yeah. I think it's so important that if there's a takeaway here, this is such an in-depth conversation. There are so many layers. It's complex. It has to do with human emotion, and anything with emotion is complicated. However, I'm just fascinated with this idea that gender, my gender identity, comes from within me. It begins as something very private. And then I'm offering it out to the world and saying, this may not be what you see, but this is me, this is who I am, this is how I feel, and I'm giving it to you so that we can communicate more effectively. But I know, because I'm in the insurance world, and we do not announce our pronouns before meetings. I know that there's an element here that is risky. You know, this is a vulnerability. If I tell you that I prefer a certain set of pronouns and then you won't use them, don't use them, accidentally misgender assign me. If I have kept it private, I'm kind of steeled emotionally away from upset. But if I have offered it to you vulnerably and publicly, and then still the society will not allow me to operate in that manner, it becomes very uncomfortable and painful.
Well, so I would like to make the distinction between a mistake and a concerted effort to not respect someone's gender and gender pronouns. And first of all, I think it is about basic human respect. We like to be called the names that we are. It is perfectly appropriate for me to meet someone named Elizabeth and say, hey, do you prefer Elizabeth or Liz? And if she tells me, I really prefer Elizabeth, and I continue to call her Liz, refer to her as Liz, I'm being a jerk. That is disrespectful. And I think the same happens with gender pronouns. There is no harm to me whatsoever to refer to someone as the gender pronoun that they prefer. And it is, I mean, we are so deeply tied to our identity. That's why we wear the clothes that we wear our hairs the way that we wear it. The way we choose to express ourselves is really saying, this is me. And so when we cannot respect someone's very sense of self, I think that's among the most deeply disrespectful things we can do.
It's beautiful that you say that. And I have some experience working with, caring for people whose gender is not cisgender. And it's really hard to really truly understand. I like to, I've been through a lot in my life. I have a checkered past, and I like to imagine that I go through the life with some level of enlightened thinking based on everything I've experienced. But even so, I can't even imagine what it must be like to be in a world that is built completely and entirely in one way and to feel differently.
But Mark, I think it's important for any of us to ask ourselves, have I ever felt like an outsider? And most of us have in some context or another. So I would just ask people, reflect on that for a moment.
Right. And then allow what does it cost, or what does it cost a person to refer to another human being as they or them? If that's what they or them are interested in. It was a little bit of creative writing at the front end where I told you the show would be called THEYdys and GentleTHEM. My daughter Zoe and I came up with that together in one day when we were discussing this these ideas topic. Also, my daughter Zoe prefers to go by a different name in entirety. She lives in Madison and goes to school in Madison, and there everybody calls her Ren, R-E-N-N. And we had a conversation about that as well, being a parent and having named my child, and then to have a child who uses a different name. She explained it to me, though, and she explained that for most of her life she felt uncomfortable. Right, that was her whole identity. And then when she had the opportunity to express herself from the inside out, she prefers to use a different name because the other name is loaded with years of uncomfortability.
But also, many of us go by different names in different contexts. And so somebody might be Michael at work and Mike to their knitting club, and their family might have called Mike Pookie when he was growing up, and Mike's husband calls him Honey.
Right.
So
it's fascinating.
And
because
we can manage that.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, right? We can manage that, and we do manage that. I have a friend at work whose name is Bob, and his wife calls him Skip. and everybody who knows him outside of the office calls him Skip, and in the office he's Bob. And we can manage that, and we're fine with that.
Right.
But as soon as it gets into this topic of gender and sexuality and all of that stuff kind of snowballing together, I sense that people have a resistance. And I have just a straight up question to you, master's in social work, director of a program that works with teens and emerging adults. Is it fear?
I think it is. I would call it discomfort. I think for many humans, our own sexuality is messy, scary, in some way unknown. And the research actually shows that most humans fall somewhere on a gender spectrum, not purely 100% heterosexual, not purely 100% homosexual. But because we have been asked to put ourselves into a narrow pocket of A or B, male, female, one or the other, when there's this fluidity, I think it makes people question their own, maybe in some untouchable way. So I think it makes people very...
Sarah, I hear what you are saying, and my heart knows that you're speaking truth, but in my head I hear 1,000 voices of the guys I grew up with in the locker rooms and in the hockey, rinks, and saying, this woman is out of her mind. There's no spectrum. I'm a man. I'm all man.
Then let me reflect back on the 60s and 70s when, for one time in our history, men and boys started growing their hair long, right? And you can kind of hear the historic, I don't know if he's a boy or a girl.
Yeah, there's a Bob Seger lyric.
Oh, okay.
In the song "Turn the Page," right?
There you go. And so I think we do, as humans, we need neurologically, psychologically, to be able to identify people. It helps us move through the world. If the world is messy and sloppy all the time, we can't function. And so I think there's that discomfort. Like, well, how do I know if they're a boy or a girl? How do I know what I'm supposed to call them? So we make it about our own discomfort rather than about someone else's comfort.
Well, I will tell you, I have learned a great deal from you today. I really have, and I'm so grateful that you made the time to come join us on our show.
My pleasure.
To me, it's an important topic, and I wish we were talking more about it and we had more time. Maybe you'll come back and we could get into the rest of it some other time. But today, I want to just thank you very much.
Thank you. And I want to make one closing remark, if I can, which is, as with everything, language evolves. So humanity evolves, technology evolves, innovations evolve, and language evolves as well. And so we're going to have a little bit of a prickly, season or two until we get through this.
And we were talking in the green room too. You have an example of how pronouns have changed over the time. Isn't it true that we had a massive pronoun change in recent history?
We shifted from thou, thee, and thine to you, yours, and your. And so, I would be a fool to refer to you as thou, although I'm going to the Renaissance Fair shortly.
Kind of like it.
Yeah, right. So we can do this too.
Absolutely, we
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah.
And I think, like you said before, if somebody in your life asks you to refer to them in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
failure to do so might just be meanness.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And allowing yourself the freedom to give somebody else what they're asking you for in regard to referring to them,
Mm-hmm. Is
calling
generous.
them by their name, the name they choose,
Yeah.
calling them by the identity that they feel that is radiating out from within them is an act of kindness.
Absolutely.
And if the world could just hear that,
Yeah.
I would be
Yeah,
satisfied.
thank you for that.
Sara Manewith, Response for Teens. We're going to take a very short break, saying goodbye and thank you to Sara, and we'll come back to finish up our discussion in just a minute.
Olivia from Washington. Laid off and trying to keep our little kids from realizing that mommy and daddy haven't eaten in a while.
Roger from California. I'm grateful we could afford our son's surgery. I'm nervous that now we can't really afford food.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Donna from Louisiana. The storm just hit, and we went from donating to the food bank to needing it.
Keisha from South Carolina. I've been skipping meals so my 2 kids can eat, but filling up on water doesn't really work.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Damian Perdue from Think Theory Radio. Every Saturday, 6 to 7 p.m., right here on WCPT 820. And now back to One More Good Idea with Marcus Newman.
Hey everybody, this is One More Good Idea. I'm your host, Marcus Newman, and we are back from our break. You know, I'm talking to my producer, Paul, here. Paul, normally this show has a break and then we come back with a musical guest. Our musical guest today was caught up in some travel and she was unable to join us. And so we were able to spend just a little bit more time with our first conversation with Sara Manewith from Response for Teens, talking about gender identity and pronouns and so forth and so on. So you're a young man, Paul. I'm a little bit older than you. I'm guessing twice your age.
Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I look a lot younger than I actually am. So.
All right. So in your world, is this pronoun situation evident? Does it show up?
Yeah. It's come up here a few times with certain guests that come here, and maybe once you've researched kind of who they are, you see on their Twitter, usually people kind of put what their pronoun is. And I think I encountered someone that had a they, them. And the hardest thing for me is being able to adjust my vocabulary.
Yeah.
You're used to saying like, oh, he's going to be here, or she's going to be here. But you have to adjust to that. Oh, they will be here.
Right.
And you're referring to one person.
It's not always as easy as it should be. It's not always as hard either. I'll tell you a quick story. I'm in the business world. I sell insurance for a living when I'm not, being a super big time radio host. And we had a breakfast. There were men and women at the breakfast. One of my colleagues wanted to do a video where he would thank the people for coming. And as the video opened, he said, "Hey guys, just wanted to thank you for coming to the breakfast." Now, for most of my life, I wouldn't even have noticed that. But as I was kind of alluding to in the first part of the show, one of my daughters it has a gender expression that is not cisgender, that is non-binary. And so I've been learning and researching and trying my best to understand my daughter to the best of my ability. And I'm sensitive to these phrases now in a very different way. And immediately I could feel it in my gut. You can't say guys.
And that's something that I have a habit of doing as well. And to me, I think, well, that's just a blanket statement. That's, I'm not referring to just guys when I say, hey, guys, it's not just men. Everyone's the collective guys, but if people are uncomfortable with that, it's not my place to tell them how to feel about that.
Yeah,
so
I think that's,
I need to adjust on how to do that to not make other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's the point that I really want to make. I wouldn't purposefully go around the world trying to make people uncomfortable. That's not who I am. It's not who you are. It's not who anybody is, really. I mean, well, some people, but nobody I want to be associated with. And to learn that something I have said may have made somebody uncomfortable, it bothers me. My first reaction is to be defensive. Well, I didn't mean it. I was just, in my mind, that's whatever.
But it's not your intention to do that to somebody.
Right. And then once I found out that I have made somebody uncomfortable, I want to make that change in my language or my presentation just because I don't want to make people uncomfortable. Now, there are those who would say, well, it makes me uncomfortable. Right? It makes me uncomfortable to call somebody they, or if I'm looking at a man to call him she, it makes me uncomfortable. What about me? What about me? And that's a difficult argument to get into. What am I supposed to say? One group of people, I'm more worried about their comfort than another. But I'm going to tell you something. One group of people, I'm more worried about their comfort than the other. I mean, the people who make that argument aren't the people who feel like the entire world is geared against them.
Exactly.
And I can't even imagine, I haven't had the easiest life. I'm not saying I've suffered either. I've been pretty lucky. I would say that I'm blessed in many ways, but life's been relatively easy. I have not felt that the whole world was out to get me or anything of that nature, or that I was at a disadvantage. But my understanding is that people whose gender identity is different than their outward sexual characteristics have a difficult time going through life. And we as a community, as a society, as a people, we can make that a little bit better by adjusting the way we use our language. And if somebody wants us to refer to them as they or he or she or whatever, we can make that adjustment. It's not really that big of a deal, I don't think.
I don't think so either. I think the goal is to be accepting, and I think we can, if someone has a preference for how they want to be identified, I think being sensitive to that would show that we are accepting of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Okay, so enough for gender for today. I'm going to shift gears. My name is Marcus Newman, and I am the host of One More Good Idea with Marcus Newman. And I'm going to break my own tradition because our musical guest was not able to be with us today. And because I am now left with 10 minutes of show, I am going to make an editorial comment. And because this is WCPT 820 AM, Chicago's progressive talk radio where facts matter, I am going to talk 100% opinion and about this next little bit of a topic. And I don't have a whole lot of facts. I haven't had time to do research, and I'm just going off of a gut feel. I am watching the news, and I am seeing more mass shootings and gun violence. Now, I listen to this radio station. I listen to other radio stations. I hear all kinds of people talking, all kinds of theory, all kinds of things. I have a very close friend who thinks that the problem are the video games. I have another close friend who attributes everything to mental illness. And I have other close friends who are gun owners and other close friends who are gun enthusiasts. And then other close friends like me who are not gun owners and who identify as pacifists. I've never even held a gun in my hand. I've never fired a weapon. I have no intention of, no desire to. There's no attraction there for me. I have played violent video games, though. I have played video games where I was a sniper. I've played video games where I was involved in a war or whatever the case may be. I don't especially like them or spend a lot of my time playing them, but I have been influenced by them. I'm 48 years old. I am the video game generation, the originals, where we pumped quarters into machines and shot laser beams at different things. And I've never felt the need to be violent in my lifetime.
were you entertained by some of those games that you played that involved shooting?
Sure, I was entertained for sure. I am the Rambo generation, right? So, I mean, I know there's a new Rambo Last Blood coming out, but I was around for Rambo First Blood and the 950 Rambo movies in between. I like movies. I like war movies. I like shooting. I'm entertained for sure, without a doubt. I do not feel influenced by them. My behavior does not feel influenced by them, but I for sure would say I'm entertained. I do not believe or subscribe to the belief that gun violence is a result of the entertainment that a child pursues. I do not believe that that is a fact. I do not believe that they're correlated. But I also want to be very careful to say that I also don't believe that the problem is mental illness. Mental illness, like anything else, is a spectrum, and a very, very small percentage of people who are diagnosed with mental illness are violent and out actually hurting people. In fact, statistically speaking, a person with mental illness is 1 billion times more likely to hurt themselves than they are to hurt another human being. That said, there are guns everywhere. And it's a difficult situation for us to be in because we do have a constitution that gives us the right to bear arms. But when that constitution was written, the guns that they are referring to in that document are different than the guns we have today. Very different. Those guns had a 3-minute delay between firing the first lead ball and the next lead ball. These guns today are different, and they are problematic. I'm going out on a limb, I know. I'm on a progressive talk radio, and I'm talking about weaponry being problematic. But there's another thing that's problematic, and my show today inspires me to talk about this. We live in a country now that focuses mainly on differences. This person is different than me. Maybe they come from a different country. Maybe they have a different idea. Maybe they wear a different suit. They have a different facial structure. They're a different gender, different identity, different. And what we seem to be missing, what seems to be bothering me, what keeps me up at night is that the ways in which we are all the same outnumber the ways that we are different too many to one for our country to be so divided. I believe that we will come around. We will come full circle. We will begin caring about each other's similarities and not differences. I am a parent. I am appalled by parents being separated from their children in any context. I don't care if it's at the border or at Disney World or here in the studio. It bothers me at a spiritual level. I don't want people to suffer. I don't want people to grieve for no reason. I don't want people to feel unsafe because of their politics, their religion, their color, their socioeconomic status. And if there's anything in this world that I can do, say, or subscribe to that will lend itself to our elected officials taking some reasonable and meaningful action to curtail the amount of violence that is being perpetrated based on differences and focus on differences. If there's anything that we can do to dial down the rhetoric, to dial up what we have in common, that we are human beings, we are Americans, we are filled with love and light, support each other in the most amazing ways when we're faced with tragedy. If we can tap into that on a day-to-day basis, support each other, promote each other, make each other feel better and more capable. I want into that country, and I'm looking for that candidate that will stand up and say those things. So please join me wherever you may be trudging the road of happy destiny. Please join me in positivity today. Find somebody out there in the world, smile at them, say something nice to them, be supportive, go out of your way, use a different pronoun, whatever it takes. But I'll be very excited to be back with you next week. This has been One More Good Idea. My name is Marcus Newman, and I'm hoping that you will come along for the ride with us next week. Paul, my producer of the day, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed working with you, and I hope we get an opportunity to do that again in the future.
Likewise, thank you.
Anybody who may be out there listening, thank you for your time, your attention, and being on the same page as us today. Thank you to Sara Manewith, to MDR Law, the law firm in Chicago that will represent you if you've had a loss. Look them up online at mdr-law.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again next week.